Hello, and welcome to the Patterson Dental Podcast, a podcast where we discuss current events in the dental industry, highlight Patterson Dental priorities, and share insights on how to help our valued customers. My name is Leslie Ricken, Sales Training Manager here at Patterson Dental and host for the Patterson Dental Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
This episode features a strategic accounts takeover with guest host Stacy Papp. Her featured guest today is Mr. Bill Neumann, CEO of Group Dentistry Now. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Patterson Dental Podcast. My name is Stacy Papp, and I am the brand and segment manager here at Patterson. And today I'm so excited to welcome Bill Neumann, the CEO of Group Dentistry Now. Founded in 2014, Group Dentistry Now is a multimedia company dedicated to providing relevant news, podcasts, education, products, services, and consulting to DSOs, group practices, and industry partners. As I mentioned, Bill serves as a CEO and consultant to several DSO organizations of various sizes, equipping them with credible industry-backed research and helping them achieve their goals no matter where they are in their journey. Bill, it is such a pleasure to chat with you today. We're going to talk about everything DSOs, which is a really interesting space now. It's constantly experiencing an evolution alongside the dental industry as private practices think of merging with other practices or even acquiring existing practices, or even as multi-location practices think of what comes next. So we're really happy to have you join us and provide insights into this incredibly ever-changing industry. So let's start off with a glimpse into the world of DSOs. What does the current state of group practices look like, and what are some of the challenges that you see that they're facing?
Well, first off, thank you, Stacy and Patterson Dental for having me on the podcast. It's exciting to talk about the DSO and emerging dental group space. And you're right, Stacy. It's evolving pretty quickly and in probably ways that I wouldn't have predicted. When we started the publication 10 years ago, I think we all thought that it would have been been just a lot of large DSOs out there and maybe not as many solo practices. And, we certainly have had a lot of consolidation, but it probably hasn't consolidated in the way that a lot of people envisioned, and I certainly wouldn't have. So I'll talk a little bit about what the market looks like. And it is kind of confusing because everybody categorizes DSOs differently. So I'll try and make it as understandable as possible. Let's get into a little bit about, just maybe how much of the market is consolidated. And that really depends on who you ask. So the ADA has a set of numbers, and then the ADSO, which is the Association for Dental Support Organizations, has a different set of numbers. But I would say in general, we're looking at multi-site, which can mean 3 locations up to Heartland or Pacific, right? The really big DSOs, probably somewhere in the about 30% consolidated range, meaning 30% of the market is some type of multi-site entity. And of course, 3 to 1,800 locations, there's a big difference. So if we break that down a little bit more, you look at those national DSOs or the elites. There are about 40 of those platforms in the U.S. I would say the next level down are regional, or we might call them mid-markets. And that is, I guess anywhere from about 10 to 99 locations. We're somewhere about 400 of those entities. And then the smaller, but still what we would consider multi-site or, DSO, 3 to 9 locations, we would consider those private group practice or emerging group. There are about 1,800 of those entities. So that's kind of what the market looks like right now. 1,800 of the emerging groups, 400 of those regionals, and about 40 of those really big national DSOs. There are some challenges out there that the DSOs are facing, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. So as far as challenges go, and I don't think the challenges are just DSO related. I think the challenges are also challenges that the dental industry, whether you're a solo or maybe a larger single practice, are seeing. The challenges are pretty much identical. We did a procurement survey last year. I think we had 53 DSOs that we surveyed in this procurement survey, and one of the questions happened to be, what are some of the challenges that you're experiencing? And number one was economic pressures. Talk a lot about inflation, the cost of everything going up, whether it's human capital or whether it's products and services. That was the number one challenge DSOs stated they had, just the cost of things going up. Second, which was pretty surprising, was recruitment and retention. It's still a huge issue. So whether it's holding on to clinicians or office staff or just getting hygienists, you've got two things going on there. One is the cost of hiring people and keeping people on, but it's just actually finding people to work is still a big challenge. So I would say that that the cost, inflation, and then recruitment and retention being challenges. I would add into that one thing we're seeing now is the economy being a little bit unsteady, and treatment acceptance may be down a bit. Recall is down. You're not getting patients to come back or having to work harder to get those patients back. So I'd say those are some of the challenges that we're seeing.
So, Bill, you mentioned a lot attached to cost and economic factors, especially in that labor market where it's challenging to find people to work, which I think is probably not a dental industry issue. It's just a corporate issue. It's just an issue that everybody seems to be facing. Can you dive a little bit deeper into what some of those economic challenges? I know this might be obvious, but just dive a little bit deeper into what those economic issues are causing as far as challenges around growth for DSOs, that they may not be as growing as quickly as they have. Is it due mostly to some of those economic challenges? Is it due some to being cautious that more economic challenges may present themselves? What's really that catalyst for slowing down the growth that maybe DSOs had experienced a little bit more rapidly in the past?
Yeah, this is a great question, Stacy, and I think it's maybe a little bit complicated. So
Sure.
I'll preface this answer by saying that I think the market is still consolidating at a good clip, meaning that fewer dentists are owning a single practice and working by themselves, or the solo practitioners are not as prevalent as they once were, and there's a trend away from that, right? There's a trend away from a dentist working by themselves, and I kind of think on an island by themselves, and working in a model or a scenario where they're in a more collaborative environment. So they could be working in still a single location, but it's a much larger location with multiple dentists working, or in a small private group practice setting. You'll hear me talk a lot about that, the emerging groups, and I think the opportunity there, and that's where I see the growth. But kind of back to your point, that I think there is a slowdown with the larger DSOs, and there's a really good company, investment banking firm called DC Advisory, and they have this really interesting chart, and be happy to share it with any of the anybody in the audience if they want any of the data that I'm referencing. I'd be happy to share that, and I'm sure you'll be able to provide my contact info at the end. But so the top private equity-backed DSOs, which are about 150 private equity-backed DSOs, from 2021 to 2022 grew by practice count. So this is the number of practices. They grew from 21 to 22 by 23%. So pretty good growth.
Yeah, for sure.
From 22 to 23, they grew by 12%. And then from 23 to 24, they grew by 4%. So we had incredible growth from 22 to 23, pretty good growth from 22 to 20, or from 21 to 22, from 22 to 23, pretty good growth. And then from 23 to 24, it was relatively flat, 4% growth. So we've seen this really big slowdown. And to that initial question, a lot of that had to do with just the cost of capital. A lot of these large groups were growing through acquisition. They had big business development teams. They were going out there and buying up a bunch of practices. And in a lot of cases, they maybe were overpaying for some practices because money was cheap. And then as the interest rates started to grow, right, to climb, they realized that maybe they had purchased some practices they shouldn't have. They've overextended themselves. Their private equity backers told them to, hey, slow down here. And we have to digest everything that we've acquired over the past couple of years. So I think a lot of that was just a ton of acquisitional growth. And that has really slowed down and in a lot of cases has stopped completely with a lot of these DSOs. And the focus has gone away from acquisitional growth to focused on organic growth or what you would call same store sales, right? Hey, let's look at what we own now at each individual location, and are we maximizing treatment acceptance? Do we have enough patients coming through the door? Are we adding multi-specialty? So that's really where the growth or the focus in growth is now at the practice level. And then I also mentioned private group practice. That's where I really see the continued growth, where these doctor entrepreneurs, the individual dentists are adding a practice or two or three and really scaling up. And I think both things are exciting. The focus on organic growth is very exciting. There's an opportunity there. And there's an opportunity, I think, for entrepreneurial dentists to really grow practices or multi-site or DSOs, whatever you want to call them, on their own.
So I want to go back to something you said about acquisitional growth. And just in your opinion, why do you think there's been a reduction in that acquisitional growth versus organic same-store growth? Is there something trending that kind of alludes you to think there's a reason why, or is it just something that maybe because of that economic environment and maybe applying a little bit more caution, if you say they were like PE backed, as you mentioned earlier, just, exercising a little bit more care to say, let's not acquire everything at one time. Let's just take it a little bit more slowly.
Well, some of it is, it's just interest rates have gone up. So they don't have the capital to invest in buying practices. No, so that would be the number one reason. Number two, I think, would be that a lot of so DSOs typically have a profile that they look at. And a lot of them tend to look at the same types of practices out there. Most DSOs aren't buying fixer-upper practices. They are buying well-run practices that are in certain markets in a lot of cases with I'll give you a profile. Here's a typical profile. It's not what all DSOs look at, but in general, they're looking at $1.5 million in production minimum, maybe a little bit under that sometimes, a minimum of 5 operatories, like more of typically 8. And they want a doctor to stay on for at least 3 to 5 years. So you kind of, when you look at those 3, the 3 to 5 years, doctor profile, the number of operatories and the production, probably really limits the number of practices that are even appealing to a DSO. So that's another thing. A lot of those types of practices were already acquired, right, in that past, the heyday, right, 3 or 4 years ago when interest rates were lower. And then the other thing is, not to say that there still aren't a lot of those practices out there, but a lot of the good I put this in quotes, the good practices were acquired. So now we've got this new. So we've got the entrepreneurial dentists that are out there now growing their practices, and a lot of them saw some of the valuations, some of the deals that were done, 3 or 4 years ago. Well, those practice valuations aren't out there anymore. These DSOs aren't necessarily paying peak value for practices anymore. Some are, but fewer are. So I think a lot of those docs that have those quality practices are like, you know what, I'm just going to do this on my own. Maybe it'll come back where, I'll get to the point where I can sell it at another time when valuations are higher, or, you know what, I'm good doing this on my own. I kind of like to do it on my own. So it's a lot of different things, but number one would be that the inflation, interest rates.
Well, and it sounds too like that growth also needs to be powered by strategic decisions and a growth strategy and plan. So share with us what some of those strategic decisions doctors should be looking to make if they're looking to add practices, whether that's, acquisitional growth, or maybe not add practices so much, but same-store growth, but especially around whether they want to acquire or build from the ground up. What are some of those strategic decisions they should be thinking about top of mind, no matter how they want to look into an expansion process?
So if we're talking about, dentists, I think you really have to understand your skill set, so we know you're a clinician, you're probably a great clinician. I think, we know that some dentists maybe aren't the best business people, some are. So I think understanding your own skill set as an entrepreneur and a business owner would be something to really consider to make sure that, you're set up for success. And if you're not, and we'll talk about this hopefully later on in the podcast, there are a ton of resources out there that really weren't available until recently. So you can leverage these resources that really haven't existed up until the past couple of years ago. But I would say, understand your skill set or your limitations. If we focus a little bit on that point around, de novo or building from the ground up versus acquisition, it really is, it's a big difference. So we'll talk a little bit of some DSOs like Pacific Dental, Aspen, Rodeo Dental, or DECA are really good at de novo. Like they've got that figured out. And they also have the right people in place really to, pick out a retail site, understand lease negotiation, know how to really build de novos from the ground up. And then others like a Guardian Dentistry or MB2 are really good at the acquisition model. They know how to go out and find the right doctors to partner with and the right practices to partner with. And then others still have hybrids where like a Heartland Now will do a little bit of de novo, and then they'll also do a little bit of acquisition. So a little bit on the acquisition side, I'll dig a little deeper there if that's okay. With an acquisition model, the benefits there is you're kind of deciding, hey, where do I go? Do I do acquisition? Do I do de novo? With acquisition, you get immediate cash flow, right? You've got a practice that has patience and cash flow. You also have an existing doctor partner there. We remember you wanted them to stay on for at least 3 to 5 years. That would be ideal. So you've got a doc that's going to stay on and run that practice, so you don't have to run it yourself or find staff. You've got their staff as well. So challenges with that model. So those are some of the benefits, right? You've got cash flow, you've got the doctor, you've got the staff. Some of the challenges is you may have a different practice management system at the practice that you're acquiring than the one that you have now. The systems may be different. So you have to figure out a way really to start to integrate. And I think integration early on is key. You don't want to wait and have 3 or 4 or 5 locations and then figure out, oh gosh, okay, now we've got to get everybody on one practice management system. Everybody needs to be brought over to EagleSoft. We want them using the same analytics platform. You want to try and do it early on. So that's one of the negatives. You're going to be buying in a lot of cases practices that are using different things, and you want to, and also you've got staff that's used to using those, so they may really be happy using a different practice management system. So to move them off is a challenge. And then another thing is you're really acquiring a different culture. So you really have to look at that acquisitional practice, that practice that you might buy, and say, hey, do they think like us? Can they fit into our culture? So I think those are some of the challenges there. Now with de novo, you don't have the integration issues. You don't have the staff issues, but you do, right? Because you don't have a staff, you have to hire them.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
you have to
Very
do
true.
all that. You have to find a dentist. You have to choose a site. So that's a totally different skill set. But if you can figure out de novo, you're also not bringing in bad habits
Sure.
or people that are want to use a different practice management system. You can say, hey, we're going to do everything identical in every single location. And if you can figure that out, then it's probably a lot easier. But it's totally different. You also don't have any patience with de novo either, right? So you've got to go out there and market.
That's true. There's the business aspect, which, I mean, I think we're not really going to spend a ton of time talking about today, but the marketing, the communication side of things, to attract those new patients in, because it's would be like opening a store and the doors are unlocked, but there's no one standing there. There's no patient schedule. There's no nothing really happening. You got to go find them. I appreciate you pacing those two things out for us. I think you hear the two words and you know that they're very different, but to have you shed some light on what makes them so different. In my mind, you were talking and I'm seeing very different Excel spreadsheets with plans and tasks and resources and timelines attached to each, both that are probably miles long, but are both very different at the same time. So thank you for taking the time to do that. That was really helpful.
Sure, and I think that's why you see a lot of the big boys or girls, right? The big DSOs, where they tend to focus on one or the other, and they're really good at that. There are some again that are kind of doing a hybrid, but you don't see a lot of that. I mean, normally they go, hey, we've kind of figured this out. We're really good at this, and they stay in that lane. And to your point about not having any patience, having to market and all the business services that you'd need with that and the different spreadsheets that you'd have to put together. There are so many great resources out there to help you do that. We can touch on that a little later in the
please
podcast,
do.
But just huge opportunity, I think, for these dentists that are hungry to scale up, but maybe don't know where to start, or maybe have started to scale up a little bit and have realized that it's not quite as easy as maybe they thought it would be. But it's a great time to be a dentist that's has an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, and that's pretty unique too, right? You usually see one or the other, that entrepreneurial mindset, or they're incredibly talented at their craft and their art. So I mean, it's really kind of like the white whale when you find someone who has that entrepreneurial dentist spark that's able to achieve their goals, but also provide. I think in the crux of everything is providing exemplary patient care. That's a non-negotiable.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So can you share some of those resources with us? I think now's a great time to, provide some, whether they're websites or if they're certain, journals or what have you. What would you recommend for those looking to grow, scale up, increase same-store growth, or just, kind of improve operations?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to talk through some of these resources. And I think, to kind of step back a little bit is, as you're thinking of adding a practice or two or three or wherever you're, whatever that scaling looks like, or even maybe going from a small single practice to one larger practice with many dentists. I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, we want to be in one location, but we want it to be bigger, and I'm going to bring in a couple of associates here. We might do multi-specialty. It's a lot easier to manage one location than it is to manage multiple locations. So there's nothing wrong with a strategy like that. But I think the number one consideration is why are you even looking to do that? Is that a passion that you have? Is that are you maxed out in the current location that you have right now? Are you looking to bring multi-specialty in, or maybe you're looking there? Maybe there's a practice down the street that you might know the doctor might be retiring, and you think that could be, that second practice that you're looking for. So really it is, the kind of the why behind that, and want to be an operator. And what I mean by that is, do you actually want to be the CEO, or at this point, you're going to be everything, right? You're going to be the dentist, you're going to be the CEO, you're going to be the COO, you're going to be doing a lot of that. So do you actually want to do that? So, is there that really that desire to do that? So I think that's kind of what you need to really consider. And the reason I kind of bring all this up, and I don't want to dissuade anybody, because I think it's a great time to be an entrepreneurial dentist. And we'll talk, because a lot of it has to do with just the resources available. But I think you also have to realize that you're going to need to have, if you're going to have multiple locations, you're going to need to have multiple clinicians. You may be able to, as a solo, add a practice and be able to hop between locations for a while, have an associate at one. But I think you're going to have to really kind of think about, bringing a doctor partner, somebody that can be truly a partner, or multiple partners. So, those are just some things to consider. GroupDentistryNow.com is our website. There's an article, and the reason I kind of talk about all this is we had a Dr. Kartik Antani. Kartik is his first name, and Kartik had 3 locations in New Mexico. And he wrote an article for us where he literally went from 3 locations back down to 1. And the title of his article was "Why Scaling Down May Lead to Greater Growth for Emerging Dental Groups." And I think he grew too quickly, and he talks about that story. So sometimes, bigger isn't always better.
Yeah,
it's a lot
true.
of it is really being mindful of the way you scale, and not necessarily doing it just because, I want to have 3 practices so I can say I have 3 practices. We hear a lot of that at the DSO meetings. DSOs will be like, well, how many locations do you have? Well, how many locations do you have? And what we never really hear is, well, yeah, I've got 7 locations, but only 4 of them are profitable. The other 3 are awful. So, those are the kinds of conversations we don't have. But, again, saying that, is as a preference to saying, hey, now we've got all these, resources out there. And I would say 10 to 15 years ago, you'd really have to figure it all out on your own. And I give a lot of credit to Steve Thorne at Pacific Dental, and Rick Workman at Heartland, and Steve Bild at Smile Brands. All these DSOs that started 20 or 30 years ago, there was no blueprint. They just kind of went around blindly, and all of a sudden, they've created these massive DSOs and have done just incredible jobs, and they all look different, but yet they're all still very, very successful. So now we've got resources. I mentioned our resource. We've got a couple thousand articles, GroupDentistryNow.com, 215 odd podcasts, a bunch of webinars. We've got a weekly newsletter. It's all free, so that's great, right? Free is good. So I would say we'd be a great resource. There are also a lot of other options out there. There are practice management consultants, but they are group practice management consultants. They're focused on helping dentists scale up. So that's all they do. There's an organization called Aligned. So that's like Align, but ED, Aligned Dental Partners. They do a great job, and they work with a lot of doctors that are adding practices, and they help out whether it comes to HR, setting up legal structures, helping on the operation side, you name it. They do a great job. Besides Align, there's Expo Dental, which is Big X, P-O, Expo Dental. There's Skytail Advisors, so Skytail, T-A-L-E. They're another one that does. So there's 3 that I know. There's others out there, but those 3 come to mind: Aligned, Expo Dental, and Skytail. You can really leverage some of the systems that they've built out, and they can help you as you scale up. But you don't even necessarily need to go that route, Stacy. I will toot Patterson's horn here and say that Patterson has really built out a super strong strategic accounts team that has a ton of knowledge, because they work with a lot of these DSOs that have been there, done that. They work with them on a daily basis. And, you can really leverage, the strategic accounts team, or even the your Patterson territory manager, because, I was at your national sales meeting, Stacy, and you've really invested a lot of time and money in preparing the territory managers, educating them, giving them, the resources to really help out dentists as they scale up. And you've also got your Navigate for DSO vendor partners, and you can leverage these vendors out there. So I think really the easiest thing to do is just reach out to your Patterson rep and start asking them questions. They'll point you in the right direction.
Well, that's so nice of you to bring Patterson into the mix. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I think you said something that I want to touch on briefly, that our territory reps, our strategic accounts reps, they do have such a level of expertise in providing those solutions. I think, and you mentioned Dr. Kartik was scaling down. So, I mean, that's, again, not something we always hear about, but something that he knows what his why is. He wanted to scale back. Just to have 3 doesn't mean that those 3 locations are operating correctly. But our reps know how to help navigate some of those strange conversations, like, hey, maybe I want to scale back. Or on the flip side, the ones they're used to hearing is, we want to add more. So, I mean, I think there's just, it seems to, no matter where you're sitting in this industry, that being able to truly show up and listen, and to say to the dentist, the front and back office staff, the leadership team, we understand